Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, we're going to have a guest join us back here. It's Aaron Hodes, and he is now enterprise account executive at Pando.ai, but he is also now your supply chain sidekick, actually. So happy to bring him on the show here again, talk to him, catch up with him a little bit, hear about kind of some of his takeaways from the 3PL world that he was heavily involved with in his last role, and get some just overall knowledge and insights from his experiences and what he recommends, not only from the 3PL side but also from the brand perspective, and just catch up with the man himself. So, Aaron, how you doing?
Kevin, I'm doing much better than I deserve. Thanks for having me on again. Always a pleasure to be talking with you.
Absolutely, absolutely, and definitely happy to catch up with you here after these new adventures you're taking on. Very great to see what you're putting out there into the world. It's always been great to see your LinkedIn post pretty much on a daily basis. But now seeing like the newsletter and everything taking off, which we'll talk a little bit about, has been fantastic too. So why don't we kind of first talk a little bit about, because you spent 6 years at a company, and I don't know if you want to mention them, don't want to mention them, but you were working closely with brands and 3PLs, and really, that's a lot of the content that you've been putting out there is talking about, looking for the right 3PL, how to position yourself properly to do that, what 3PL should do correctly. But
Mhm.
tell us kind of some of your biggest takeaways from that 6 years of experience, and what's some of the real big things that you think people should always look out for, always know.
Yeah, absolutely. I was really fortunate to be one of the first account executives at ShipBob. They're a venture capital backed, 3PL for those who aren't familiar. And I had the great fortune of working with some of, the world's largest e-commerce brands, and working alongside them, really in the trenches. I found that every single brand, there are no two brands that are alike. And while there are similar
Mm,
challenges that they may be trying to solve for, there's not a, I think the one big takeaway is that there's not a one size fit all 3PL for
mhm.
any e-commerce brand. And it's really, um, I talked about this in one of my newsletters, but really, I think before brands go and try to find their 3PL, they really need to understand and get their own house in order, um,
Yeah.
and really
Mm,
understand from their perspective what are they trying to achieve by working with a 3PL, and more importantly,
mm,
what do they want out of a 3PL? Because ShipBob is a fit for it was a fit for a lot of brands, but also they weren't a fit for everyone. And
mm,
that's often what I would tell people, on the front end of calls. But um, just had the just an awesome time working, there for 6 years. Learned a lot, made some really great relationships, and still really close friends with a lot of people there. And yeah, took away a lot of great um, insights about what e-commerce brands actually care about when working with their 3PL, and really,
mm.
what grinds their gears the most. Maybe we can get into that, a little bit later.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's great to hear that, and I love that you said too that the brand needs to kind of get their house in order, in a sense, right? To be able to probably, I guess, properly and maybe have a good shot at having a good experience with a 3PL. So maybe talk to us a little bit about what you mean by that, and kind of
hmm
what kind of steps do brands should they take when they're going to start looking for that 3PL, or realize like, hey, they want help with fulfillment.
Right. I think when they realize, if you're an e-commerce brand owner, if there's a point in time, and every brand reaches this inflection point at some point in their journey, some sooner, some later, but they realize that doing fulfillment is not a revenue generating activity. It
Mm,
is it's a cost on the P&L, right? Whether they like it or not,
yeah.
and whether or not they want to do that in house or outsource it. There's no right or wrong way. It's really about what is best for that specific brand, and more importantly, in that specific time in the history of their brand. And so really understanding, I think, from their perspective, a lot of brands go into it, I think, hmm, I don't like doing pick, pack, ship. Let me outsource it. I think that's
Mhm.
like really like the low hanging fruit, and let me go try to find the lowest cost provider to do this. And I often think that's a fool's errand, because
Mm.
you pay for what you get is often what
Yeah.
I say. And so you really want to understand your SKU catalog. Are you shipping? Are you, first of all, what are you selling? What vertical, what category are you selling products into? Are you selling heavy items? Are you selling lightweight items? When you're doing the pick and pack, what kind of unboxing experience are you looking for, right? Do you have something that is needs to
Mm.
be neatly wrapped in tissue paper with two stamps on it, you know, with a kiss on top, or can it be just something that is placed into a brown corrugate box or a polymailer, bubble mailer, and shipped out? I think a lot of those have to be considered, and um, you know, as many as just some of the factors that you're looking for when you're going to choose a 3PL partner. And those are like the
Mm.
objective metrics. But then also I talked about a lot in my newsletter is the subjective metrics that come when you're choosing a
Mm.
3PL
Right.
provider. Um, what values and what mission is your brand trying to cultivate, and what are you trying to put out into the universe, and how does your 3PL fit into your vision and just your cultural vibe, right? What is the ethos of the 3PL that you're trying to go to? I think those are all really important factors that oftentimes get overlooked when you're
Mm.
going to a 3PL provider. When I worked with a lot of the bigger brands, they would have ex consultants, XEY, ex BCG people come in and try to, well, super valuable. Don't get me wrong. I think they looked at a 3PL relationship in a very transactional manner,
Yeah.
um, at no fault of their own. But there's so much more that goes into a 3PL relationship, and I think that's why, in general, the feeling around like people just like don't like their their 3PLs. It's a very low uh,
Yeah.
rated, like you know what I'm saying? Like people just in general have a connotation of negativity, or they hold some negative feeling towards the 3PL regardless of who they're with, like usually. And
Yeah.
that started well before my time. Um, and I think that hopefully like with my
Definitely.
with what I'm putting out there, and there's a lot of great 3PLs out there that
Mhm.
including ShipBop, they're great. That you just really have to find what's best for your brand. And it really takes a lot of
Yeah.
introspection before you go out and like, try to put 8 different 3PLs on an Excel sheet and try to line them up, because I think not, that's one way to do it. I would argue that it's
Mhm.
probably not the best way.
Mm. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's interesting too, like you said, and I've certainly heard it in the industry too. The 3PLs, I mean, they get a bad rep
Mm,
sometimes. And unfortunately it's because, there's bad experiences that happen
yes.
out there. Right. And like you said, the brand is kind of like, it's almost skeptical. It's almost like,
Hmm.
if you were going to go, date somebody and you didn't give them the chance and trust them right off the bat. It's like you just start off like, no, I don't trust you, right? And
Hmm.
it's like, well, why are we even going into this partnership, right?
Yep.
So, I mean, I think it's really interesting on that side, and I'm curious, in your experience there, as you've worked with all these different brands,
Hmm.
and you talk about kind of getting that house in order and how they can kind of prepare themselves to be able to be ready to work with a 3PL and get the most of that partnership. I mean, was there ever a time where maybe there's were some like challenges where the brand kind of didn't necessarily do what they needed to do to be in that position, and you kind of just wish that, like, hey, like, I wish I could have just jumped in there and just,
Hmm.
like, told you, like, do this, or helped you, like, figure this out before you took that step.
Yeah. Oh yes. I think there's many, but I think the one
Mm.
there's two big areas that I would say. Number one is operational alignment, kind of what we touched on earlier, but making sure that
Hmm.
you understand all the different packouts that you're specifically doing currently, and more importantly, what are your expectations moving forward with the 3PL? And you want to get
Mm,
into really nuanced conversations with every 3PL provider that you do. And not just taking like from the 3PL, yes, we can do that at face value. You have to dig and peel back this onion, multiple layers to
mm,
figure out how they've been able to do XYZ for past clients and how have they been successful. I will also say that if there's something that I wish brands did more of, and I don't think this is like the fault of any one brand, but maybe it's like an opportunity for
mm.
someone to come out. I mean, there is software that exists, but I don't know if brands are taking
Yeah.
advantage of it. Is doing some sort of demand planning and actually giving that to their
Mm,
3PL provider. And so I think there's
yeah.
disconnection between marketing teams and operations teams, and therefore the 3PL provider. Marketing team says we're running this great promo for this new product launch. They launch it. They talk about all the sales that are going to come with it, but they don't communicate. That doesn't get communicated down. Doesn't
Yeah.
go through the game of telephone to the 3PL provider. Next thing you know, the 3PL provider who's planned out labor for consistent, let's just say, 1,000 orders a month, they get hit with 1,000 orders a day. Um,
Mm,
I don't think that's fair to the 3PL provider, quite frankly. And it really doesn't
right.
set anyone up for success. And so, what I would say is if you're in, there's one thing I would really hone in on is getting, when you're in the vetting process, giving order volumes, historical annual, monthly order volumes, then annual order volumes to your 3PL provider. Talk about any seasonality that comes with it. Typically brands see seasonality during peak season like most, but
Mhm.
if you're like a swimwear brand, you might see more seasonality during Q2 and Q3, right? Like these are the types of ebbs and flows that you really want to discuss with your partner because the 3PL space has historically been really reactive. And one of my goals with
Yeah.
doing, the supply chain sidekick is bring more proactiveness to a very reactive
Mm,
industry. And so, while I don't have all the answers, I think it starts with communication. I think really the foundation of that is communication between the brand and the 3PL partner. And if you can communicate what your sales order
mm,
volumes are going to be week over week, even if you're projecting it, um, maybe you hit 70%. The 3PL will build in whatever buffer in terms of labor planning that they can do. But if you go in blind and you just do this huge promo and the 3PL is not expecting it,
yeah.
um, you're going to be upset. More importantly, the end customers are going to be upset. And that's really the North Star, right? For everyone, brand and 3PL, is how do we make the customers happy? And I think
Mm.
that if you keep that like as your vision looking into the future, it usually you're able to solve most problems.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's so huge too, to be able to have that line of communication. And I think, a lot of brands definitely miss that. I mean, I
Mm.
worked for a very large brand, worth multiple billions of dollars. And I was on site with the 3PL kind of as a audit checks and balances type of person there.
Mm.
And yeah, I couldn't believe it. One day, the guy from the 3PL, he's like, "Yeah, we only know, that you guys are gonna have a sale because we signed up for your, email
Mm-hmm.
marketing." And I'm like, "Wait, so you don't know?" And he's like, "Oh, yeah, we check in the morning. If you guys send something out there's gonna be a sale, and then we shift a bunch of employees over." And I'm like, "What? Like, there has to be a better way to do this." So, I mean, it's certainly a thing that I think can be super beneficial because, I mean, if you look from a operations perspective, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's easier to I guess, cut people, at least send them home
Mm-hmm.
early than it is to get people at the last minute to come
Yeah.
in and get extra people, right, to be able to handle that additional volume. So
Mm-hmm.
so I think that communication is such a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if you look from the 3PL perspective, right, I mean, I think a lot of 3PLs would probably agree with you and say that, like, "Yeah, we would love that. We would love that level of communication," right? But, how do you think, a 3PL themselves can potentially better position themselves to be able to kind of address some of these struggles that brands may have or some of the
Mm-hmm.
struggles that you've seen that brands have?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it all starts with the process that 3PLs have lined out when they're talking about, customer and client acquisition, right? During their
Mhm.
procurement process, what kind of objectives are they looking to solve for, and what information do they need to extract from the brand? And then more importantly, assuming the brand says, okay, great, we're ready to move forward, it's that point where you're doing some sort of really hands-on white glove type of, onboarding And that's when you really start that intimate, you know, sharing of data, best practices,
mm,
and really having a 3PL be a lifeline and being that operational, right hand for the brand. And what I often say is, you know, at minimum, when you're starting with a new 3PL, it may even be required to do daily check-ins. A
mm,
daily stand-up call, with between a new 3PL and their brand, in my opinion, should almost be required until
yeah,
until you reach some sort of like stage of normalcy. To then maybe you can go to like a weekly cadence or a bi-weekly cadence. Um, and it's a standing meeting, meaning if you keep it on the calendar, and really what it's there for is to hold everyone accountable. More than anything, is to
mm,
have people come, and if there are action items that people want to knock off their list, great. And if there's nothing, that's okay too. Logistics is like a no news is a is a good news type of
yeah,
industry, most of the time.
yeah,
So you know inevitably what you would want to do then is do quarterly business reviews, and I got
mhm,
the chance to be a part of those. While I wasn't running those personally in my time at ShipBob, I did shadow a bunch of them just to hear the brands that I had the
mhm,
opportunity to bring on and and close as a sales rep. How are they doing? So I
mm,
would shadow many of those calls, and obviously having annual business reviews. And I think having not only operational stakeholders involved in those conversations, but other key executives. It's not the 3PL as much as it does live in operations world. Like if you're
mhm,
a company that's doing 10, 20, 30 million north in in revenue, I mean, you probably have, I would say, maybe like a CEO, COO, CFO. Like, you may or may not want to, at least at the very least, give them a recording of what that call went, because I've never seen a relationship that impacts other parts of the business in e-commerce more than the 3PL relationship does. Like, it makes or
yeah,
breaks clients sometimes, and that's really why I think it leaves a bad taste in many people's mouths, because you know it, if you choose the wrong 3PL, it is a five or potentially
yeah,
six-figure problem. And that's a really
yeah,
tough pill to swallow. You ever heard nightmare stories of people trying to exit 3PLs? I mean, it's not a fun
oh yeah.
it's not fun for anyone, and you have a really expensive problem on your hand that needs to be fixed in short order.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, as you're looking at like e-commerce specifically, I mean, when you're moving lots of volume and you have any disruption there, like I mean, that's every kind of disruption is like potential lost customers, right? And this could be a real slowdown to the business. So I mean, it's a great point there to call out that you want to make sure that you're getting that knowledge, and I love the idea too of like first having a robust onboarding process, but then also having those kind of daily stand-up calls. And I've done those in previous projects myself, and I think that it allows kind of both sides of the table to say like have that point to say like, okay, like I don't think we need these anymore because we're comfortable now, things are running, we're good. But it, like you said, it still has that accountability that like,
Hmm.
okay, like every day we're gonna show up. Is everything good today? Yeah,
Hmm.
everything's good. Or no, we had a challenge here, and it opens that line of communication more, which I think is a really good tip there from you. So definitely very very interesting there on the 3PL side as well.
Yeah,
So let's talk a little bit about kind of your we teased it here a little bit, but the supply chain sidekick, your new project here.
yeah,
So tell us kind of like about the supply chain sidekick. Where did that come
yeah,
from, and what's really your focus there?
yeah. It really started, I would say, when I started posting on LinkedIn probably 2.5 years ago, and really my initial
Mhm.
idea was, okay, I start posting on LinkedIn, maybe it starts to drive some meaningful opportunities for me at my time at ShipBob. And it didn't really, for the most part. Surprisingly enough, but what it did was it
Okay.
built a really robust network, for me. And
Mm,
what I realized is I was thinking about making a website and a newsletter for probably at least a year and a half, and the timing just became right. at the end of 2022, me and my wife had our first kid, so I was pretty busy with that and trying to learn how to be a dad.
Yeah.
And so, I still kind of I somewhat have an idea of what it's what it's like, but then life starts to get back.
You never stop learning.
Very true. Um,
Yeah.
but then I got back to a little bit of normalcy, and then I just said, screw it, it's time to build a website. And so at the, like early December, I just built a
Mhm.
website and started a newsletter. And upon leaving, ShipBob at the end of December, I had a lot of people just reach out to me, both brands and 3PL owners, saying, Aaron, I've liked your posts, or I've interacted with your posts, and I'm a 3PL owner,
Mhm.
and I'm struggling to find the gaps, or I'm struggling to really understand the gaps in my own sales process, and we're seeing great opportunities come through the top of funnel, but we need some help converting them. And um, on the
Yeah.
opposite side, brands, say, I hate my 3PL, like try to help me, right? And there are some great services out there that do like matchmaking services, but I think, deep down, what
Mhm.
someone needs is someone like there with them, like in the battle with them. And this is someone who's a sales rep, right? Like my job is to solve problems and to solve
Yeah.
pain. And so if I can do that, like the outcome of that is helping, someone, right? And having that type of,
Mhm.
servant type of mindset, I think has helped me in my career. It's taken a while to get to that, mindset, but I think if I use that,
Yeah.
it's been great. And so I've been working, closely with a few 3PL owners and brands now to really help, cultivate, just like really unique strategies, and really understanding before
Mhm.
saying, can I even help, is understanding what are they currently doing? What is the current state of affairs? And really
Yeah.
going into the weeds, and being on, working with them late at night. I'm working, 8, 9, 10 p.m. sometimes at night with these folks. Really getting into it. And it's been fun. Scratching a little bit of an entrepreneurial itch that I have. So.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, it's really good, and I think it's such a good thing to focus on too, like you said, because, they're getting, these leads or these potential clients in, top of funnel, like you said, and then it's about converting them, right? But, I think a lot of times, if we look at, I guess you could say the same thing, from like a brand perspective. Like the brand is coming to the 3PL because, logistics and, fulfillment is not necessarily their
Hmm.
expertise, right? And the same thing for 3PLs in some cases too. They got into it because, they're operations people, right? Or they're supply chain people. And it's like, well, that doesn't necessarily make you, great at sales, right? Or being able to close deals, necessarily.
Hmm.
So I mean, I think it's really interesting that you're focusing, kind of in on that target there. I mean, I guess in that vein, I mean, what's kind of your one of your top, sales tips or conversion tips, if you don't want to give away
Oh,
any, secret sauce,
oh
but
wow. No, I would say, working really closely with, you know, with 3PL owners, it's having a really in-depth, like, needs discovery and needs assessment conversation to, like I said, understand the objective but both the
mm,
subjective metrics. And please, for anyone that listens to this eventually, please don't just send pricing over email. That's a surefire way to never get
yeah,
a response from any brand. Always do pricing conversations live with someone over the phone, or
mm,
a
okay,
Zoom call, Meets call, what have you. Yeah, but I think it always comes back to, can't give them pricing without understanding what they're looking to solve, what metrics are they being currently, negatively impacted on, and really what do they give a crap about, um, when they're
mm,
working with the 3PL. Because I didn't invent the saying, but this is a marriage, right? Like, I I
yeah,
made a witty post the other day where I said on LinkedIn, I said, if you're moving 3PLs every 18 months, I don't think the 3PL is the problem. And I think that goes back to my
yeah,
initial statement. It's like, you don't
yeah,
you don't know what you want, but then that's okay, right? But you really do need to,
mhm,
like, have a bit of introspection with you and the team, and understand, okay, like, this didn't go well with our 3PL. What are all the things that didn't go well? Was it because of the 3PL, or is it because maybe we need to, sharpen our focus in, areas one, two, three? So, there's that. But I'll keep the audience, waiting with a bated breath. I won't give out all my trade secrets just yet.
All right. Well, maybe on the newsletter they'll pop up, so they'll have to subscribe,
There you
right?
go.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's such a good point, and I did catch that post, and I thought it was really interesting because I mean, it is to a point, right, where like even someone friend from high school had sent me this newsletter from somebody that was like they're from the e-commerce side, and they were just like talking about 3PLs and like they're evil
Mm,
and
I think I know what
they're trying
newsletter
to
that you're
like
talking about. This is
scam you
something
on
that
pricing. Yeah,
recently
did you
came.
see that one?
I
Yeah.
did, from a very prominent e-commerce man who did some stuff in
Yes.
the
Yeah.
natural
Yeah.
deodorant
Yeah.
space. We'll keep it that. I did see that. That was
Yeah.
it was an interesting newsletter, and one that I had put out I think just 24 hours prior, to see his it seemed very jaded, but a lot of
Yeah.
what he said was not wrong by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely had some good
He
points
had
in
many
there,
good
yeah,
points.
but I think it was coming from a little bit of a position of some prior, pain, maybe, I think too,
Mm-hmm.
you could say,
Yeah,
right?
I mean that's what it is, and again, I don't think there's like faults like on anyone's like side. I think it just people look at a 3PL provider as just something that they can like
Mm,
change in and out, as if it's just like a pair of socks, and
yeah,
it's just not, and
it's
it's
not.
so
Yeah,
not, and like and that's something that I tried to like stress to people, like this is not something that you want to make a decision on in like a week. Like, could you make a decision on a
mm,
3PL provider in a week? Sure, but you'll probably end up in the same crappy position that you were
yeah,
prior. Like, if you're actually serious about finding the right 3PL provider for you, like honestly, it should be like a minimum, you know, could it go faster? Are there instances where it goes faster? Of course. Yes. I think for the most part, though, if you're really trying to do it right, take your time. It should take a month. It really should. Like,
yeah,
and one thing that I will say that brands should be doing more of, go visit the 3PL on site. I don't care if they got one warehouse or
yeah,
multiple, because you'll get to see the leadership people that are running the 3PL, and more importantly, you get to see the people that are, the lovely warehouse associates that are running. You'll get to like see the energy, and more importantly, like feel the energy in the building, and you'll
mm,
quickly, I always say, like, when I went on tours with potential merchants that wanted to come to ShipBob, I almost felt as if we got so much more accomplished in that 3 to 4 hour time that we spent together than we did like for the last
yeah,
like 3 months over Zoom calls, because they just like there was just like this thing that clicked, you know, and it's
yeah,
only until you like go and visit them where the the pieces are like finally put together. And so I would encourage
mm,
brands, again, not a requirement, but I would highly encourage you, if you uh, to go and visit your 3PL partner. If they have one site, go visit them, make a day out of it. You potentially are saving yourself, like I said, from a 5 or 6 figure problem. Not only that, but it ends up turning into a business continuity problem if things go south, and they can go
yeah.
quick. And so if you're trying to stop business continuity issues, make sure that you're picking the right 3PL provider.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, and I agree. I mean, I think a site visit can do so much and tell you so much about the just the company itself and the culture and how they just value your product and the customer's product that they have in the building already and all those different types of things. So really interesting here. And I want to touch too a little bit because you're focusing in with the supply chain and sidekick a little bit on the freight side as well,
Mhm.
which you do have some experience in your background too prior to Ship Bob, right? If I remember correctly.
Yes.
And I'm curious, like, where do you think there are wins that can be had when it comes to putting more focus on freight as a 3PL and also from the brand perspective, which actually I think interesting enough in that newsletter we were talking about, he touched on that a little bit, right? I mean, how do you leverage your 3PL
Mhm.
to have a better perspective from freight, or should you try and do it yourself as a brand?
Oh, it's a good question. I think that in my experience, ShipHop focused primarily on the SMB and the mid market. We weren't doing e-com fulfillment for like the Nike, Adidas, Lululemons of the world. We weren't
Hmm.
doing, for that large scale of like the enterprise. But what I typically see is like kind of this natural progression. Like when you're doing, I don't know, less than a couple thousand orders per month, you're typically doing e-com fulfillment in house. Then because your
Yeah.
team is like super lean, you'll outsource it for, in that time in which you outsource to a 3PL or many different 3PLs, right? That could be for a couple years. And then traditionally what ends up happening, kind of just like the life cycle of what supply chain looks like, is people, you know, there's an argument to be made that you should have more of like a variable cost, like in your operating model, right? By outsourcing. But then
Mm.
brands really over the last like year and a half, I saw a lot of brands really bring it back in house.
Yeah,
And
bring it
yeah,
back.
and then
Yeah.
they bring it in, and I don't know if there's not like a magic number that they bring it in, but it's like once they reach a certain scale, they
Mm.
typically start having those strategic conversations internally. It's like, okay, should we invest in the 100,000 square foot warehouse? Should we hire our own staff? Should
Mm.
we get our own WMS, TMS, OMS? Should we get all of that? What does that afford us, right? And what are we, by outsourcing? What are we not, getting? And so
Mm.
I'm making a post about, later on next week about why a 3PL may not be, a fit for you in the long term. You know, I think Joe
Mm.
McIntyre also was talking on it. I can't remember if it was today or the other day, but yeah, at some point brands do bring it in house. When that is,
Yeah.
if there's something that we talked about a lot at Ship Bob, is that every brand, it's a case by case basis, and that is just so true because there are no two brands that are alike. It's really the
Mm.
God's honest truth.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and I think that's so true, and it's interesting too, 'cause I think a lot of the couple of the 3PLs I've talked to on the podcast, I mean, they started as brands
Yes.
actually, right? I mean, we know, yeah, like Joe Spizak, for
Yep.
example, right? So it's probably the big example there,
Yep.
right? It started with the brand, didn't like 3PL experience, and basically just said like, "Oh, I'll do this myself," right?
Yep.
And then just grow it from there.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think it's very interesting, and like you said, that case by case basis is certainly something to keep in mind, and really interesting always to talk to you and dig into these topics with you, Aaron, and I appreciate you coming on the
Of
show.
course.
Why don't we kind of touch a little bit on your other new job too that you got here
Yeah.
is Pando.ai. So what is that? What is Pando?
Yeah, Pando is a startup company headquartered right here in Chicago. Pando
Hmm.
is a fulfillment cloud, AI powered, machine learning powered, and it's a no code logistics platform that's really helping to automate the entire procure to pay freight cycle. And so they have three bits of their platform, everything from freight procurement to a multimodal TMS, um, and then obviously to the freight audit and payment. So they're building what they call the fulfillment cloud that powers the entire end-to-end fulfillment journey. And so been I'm 3.5 weeks in, definitely learning a lot,
Mm.
but been having some
Yeah.
really great conversations with some prominent both public and private companies. And so uh, yeah, I mean, I'm trying to, parlay all my experience that I learned at ShipBob and kind of taking that forward. I'm the third third senior sales rep here, at Pando. They're
Mm.
um, founded in India, but now helping to build
Okay.
out their North American sales team. So it's been a fun ride, and learning how to sell into the actual enterprise space has been uh, an interesting challenge.
Interesting, interesting. I'm curious, like what's exciting to you about their tech, this like fulfillment cloud that you're talking about?
Yeah, definitely. I think that, historically, if you use like an SAP or like an Oracle for like your like transportation management system, like
Mm.
those are typically like just like on-prem type of services, and these are like really like just like
Yeah.
legacy tech. And what they're doing is, built in the cloud, and what they're effectively building is like this co-pilot that helps, drive the digital supply chain transformation for a lot of the mid-market and enterprise segments. And really what this is going to do is allow both end users of the software as well as executives within these organizations to, I think, take
Mm.
actionable insights from this platform to hopefully drive just better business outcomes in the supply chain. Like, and truly everything from procurement So it touches on multiple departments: procurement, the transportation teams. You got sourcing, procurement, transportation, and then you have the finance team that's doing all the freight bill audit stuff. So it touches on the entire organization, and this is an industry that
Mm.
is pretty outdated, to say the least. There's some
Yeah.
pretty big logos that are leveraging Pando's tech, and so the goal is to get this to scale, in North America. So we got
Mm.
a big goal ahead of us, and it's an honor to be a part of the team. And we're small, we're lean, and we're mean. So we're trying to make some waves here.
Yeah, awesome, awesome. Love to hear it, and definitely, kudos to you on the new gig and
Thanks,
all the
man.
things you're doing out there. And always a pleasure to talk to you and read your posts and all those great things about the world of 3PLs and brand relationships and all the good things and bad things too that come along with that, right?
Yeah,
So so if people are interested in checking out the newsletter, finding out more about Supply Chain Sidekick,
yeah.
what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, you can follow me on LinkedIn, but I have my own website. It's just my name, aaronhodes.com. You can go there. You can sign up for my newsletter. It's built on Beehive, so you can sign up there. I can also drop you, Kevin, a link to the sign up for the actual newsletter after this. And then if you're a 3PL that is looking for maybe a little bit of help to close some qualified deals, I'm your guy. And if you're a brand that need some help finding the next best fit, um, I can maybe help you, but we'll see.
All right, great. And we'll definitely put all that information at thenewwarehouse.com as well so people can easily find it. And I will say I've subscribed to the newsletter and I think it's great so far. You're doing a good job there. So highly recommend it.
Thanks.
Definitely a good read. So, Aaron, thank you so much for coming back on the podcast.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate the invite and hope to see you soon.